Hello and welcome to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are finally back. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, we caught a game over the past couple weeks. I took a trip. Obviously, you kind of played into why we haven't recorded in a while. I was in Toronto. We saw a game. We saw the fabled Brannen Isert against Bobby Dalbec matchup. How you been doing?
Doing good. Bearing the lead. You got out to St. Mary's and interviewed Russell Martin. You had a big couple weeks as well, but great to be back on the mic recording again. And the Blue Jays, well, at least they snapped their losing streak the other day, but certainly coming back at a bit of a down period in Blue Jays land.
Yes, while we were gone, I would say probably has been one of the busiest 2 weeks in this Blue Jay season that we've had so far. Bo Bichette went on the injured list. He came off the injured list. Orelvis Martinez got called up. Orelvis Martinez got his first career hit. Orelvis Martinez got suspended for 80 games. Vladdy's looking great. Springer's on the downturn. They lost 7 games in a row. Dalton Varsho got hurt. Spencer Horwitz had a 2-home run game. They got swept a couple times. It's just been an insane couple weeks. So we got a lot to catch up on. But I think before we can kind of get into overall the losing streak, I think we got to talk about the Orelvis stuff because wow, I cannot believe how that played out and just how insane of a storyline that is.
Just unbelievably indicative of this Blue Jays team, I think, is the best way I could put it. Of course, you think that you've reached bedrock, and now your best hitting prospect, the one guy that it seems like could really rejuvenate this offense, add some power to it, suspended for 80 games. And the crazy thing too, he'll probably be back at some point this season because there's so much season left that this team is going to make you suffer through, right? This is just an unbelievably unfortunate set of circumstances. It seems like, obviously, depends on if you believe him or not. I mean, I would be inclined to hope so, but if it is, it's a very unfortunate set of circumstances. But just a boneheaded, just unbelievable turn of events. And now you've got Spencer Horwitz playing second base for you because Orelvis Martinez, who, mind you, was likely to end up back in the minor leagues still, is not available to you.
Yeah, I obviously Orelvis was likely to be sent down as soon as Bo returned from the injured list. And of course, Stuart Baroa gets to make his MLB debut because Orelvis gets suspended, and then he goes right down after that. I don't even think he made a plate appearance. But it's just shocking. I mean, seeing that notification come in was insane, and just how fitting it was for the season where you kind of have this guy who profiles a little bit differently and you're excited about, and then just to have the PED suspension come down, it's crazy. And I mean, before that, I kind of want to get your thoughts on this because obviously we haven't had the chance to talk about it, but what are your thoughts on him not really getting into the lineup despite being on the big league roster for 5 days?
I think it was just kind of indicative of where they felt they were with him, right?
Yeah.
He was up because of injuries. He hadn't forced their hand. And I mean, we saw it when he was fielding. He's not big league ready when it comes to the defensive side of the ball, which is a thing when you're talking about guys. A lot of the time you got service manipulation and you get, a Chris Bryant or a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. where the GM will be like, yeah, their defense isn't big league ready. And the bat is obviously ready. And it's just, it's just words. But in this case, it's pretty evident that this guy was not big league ready. And he did obviously pick up his first big league knock, but the glove far from major league ready. And it's basically everything we had heard at the time of his recall was that he was not going to be defensively particularly strong, right? So I think that it's all pretty reasonable in the end, all totally understandable, but now all of a sudden becomes a moot point because of the suspension.
Yeah, I was interested that they did kind of decide to bring him up when I think it's just more of a result of him being on the 40 man at that point in time. And obviously it's great for him to be up and be around the team a little bit, but now now he just loses out on all of that development time. And I think obviously he's 22 and it's he'll be back this season, like you said, but it really does hurt that he's going to miss all this time for development defensively and offensively, and even like missing out on some of that extra time in the major leagues that now he just isn't going to get.
Yeah, it really just comes down to development, right? And it also speaks to the lack of depth that the Blue Jays have in their farm system. Your number two prospect goes by the wayside, and now you've got your number one prospect, Ricky Tiedemann, who is just barely making his way back. He's making a couple of rehab starts, if I recall correctly. He had one the other day in Dunedin. And then now your number two prospect, Orelvis Martinez, out of the picture. You've got, a little bit further down, not really major league kind of guy, but you've got Arjun Nimala, of course, having his own struggles. Like, there is a barren wasteland of guys right now in the minor leagues for the Blue Jays, and it's really becoming really acute and really concerning. And this only brings it really to a head.
Yeah, it's I mean, obviously, like if Nathan Lucas is not on the injured list in the minor leagues, like he probably comes up. If Leo Jimenez wasn't on the concussion list, he probably comes up. So I mean, cool story to get a Relvis up and everything, but I it's obviously unfortunate the way that all played out, and it sucks that we didn't get to see more of him. I'll kind of leave it there.
Totally.
Yes. So while this is all going on, the Blue Jays go on a 7-game losing streak where they get swept by the Red Sox, and then they get swept by the Guardians, and then they lose the series opener in Boston. But the 7th game was in almost the worst way possible, where they go up 6-2, and then they let a pop-up drop, give up a home run, let the Red Sox get back into it, and then walk it off. I mean, like I thought there was some pretty obviously that game's going on at the same time as Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, so maybe not as many eyes on that one as could have been, but it was really that one. I think some questionable decision making where we talk about it all the time, right? Like where you don't need to be using your closer only in save situations, and Chad Green is up in the bullpen while the Red Sox are making this comeback off of Zach Pop and Nate Pearson. And I don't like Nate Pearson's not really at fault because he had the pop-up drop and all that, but like Zach Pop being tasked with finishing off that inning and then coming back out in the 9th, I think was just awful decision making.
Yeah, and listen, like we talked about before we hit the record button. Of course, they win the other day, and that kind of, call it, eases tensions. But this bullpen is a shell of what it potentially could have been and what it was supposed to be. The fact that you're turning to Zach Pop in these leverage situations in and of itself just really speaks to how this is a team that is just falling apart at the seams. And I think it's a big part of why at this point we're approaching the beginning of July, and we had talked about this in the weeks leading up to kind of this, that stretch to save the season we talked about. We were kind of saying that once July 1st rolls around, we'll have to know where this team is. And the fact that the bullpen is in this condition, and the fact that the Blue Jays now are sitting goodness knows how many games back of a wild card, like they're out of it. Like, this team looks like they got to be sellers.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this because I think for me being in the building over the last week, kind of like during some of the Guardians and Red Sox series at Rogers Center, like really reinforced the notion that this team isn't good enough to do it. Like, I think being in there and seeing just like it just wasn't good enough. And like I obviously, like, you're not eliminated until the numbers say you are. Like they have a 5.1% chance of making the playoffs according to Fangraphs, but like, man, like I know in like this sphere of covering a team, you don't want to be like they're done until they're actually done, because there's always a chance, but like I think they're pretty done.
Well, think about the set of circumstances that would have to come together for that 5% outcome to factor in. It's just not a universe that really seems possible. You're looking at a huge Bo second half. You're looking at a huge Vlad second half, who, by the way, of all this kind of negativity, I will give Vlad the credit that he is due. Yeah. This guy has really turned a page the last couple of months, basically since the beginning of May, middle of May-ish, and has become once again kind of the guy that you'd hoped he'd be. Maybe not the, MVP candidate level guy, but he's had a lot of success, and credit is due in that case. But again, you're looking at needing guys like Kevin Gausman and Jose Barrios and Yusei Kikuchi all turning it around because they've all struggled of late. You're looking at the bullpen needing to be a totally different beast. You're looking at a lot of, call it depth guys or supplementary pieces, if you will. I mean, Davis Schneider has slowed down. Danny Jansen has slowed down. You're looking at guys like that having really, really good second half. There's just so many things that would need to break for these Blue Jays. And they'd have to win it probably like I'm trying to think like a 650 maybe win percentage pace to be in the mix. Like they'd have to bang out bare minimum like 65 wins to get into the conversation. And maybe it's less than that. Maybe it's not that many. But there's just not very much room for error with this team because of the hole they dug themselves in the first half of the season.
Yeah, I think looking at it, it was like they needed to play at a 650 win percentage to get to like 90 wins, and that was before they went on their 7-game losing streak. So, it's crazy when you look at it. Like right now, in they're 6.5 back of the final wild card spot. They're only better than 3 teams in the American League: the Angels, the A's, and the White Sox. And if you look at the teams ahead of them, like it's the Rangers, the Tigers, the Rays, the Astros, and the Royals. And the Astros are on a 7-game winning streak. They're looking like the team that's been to 7 straight ALCSs, and the Rays have been playing better. Like they're starting to figure it out. And the Rangers, like they're due to get back. Like they got back Scherzer. They're due to get back like DeGrom, Tyler Mahle. Like that's a team that I would be concerned about. Like they had, like, remember the second half that they had last year. Like they went, or I guess it was the first half that they were insane. Like they kind of faltered in the second half, but like they've shown as a team that they are capable of like popping off and going on a huge run. Like the only team that are ahead of them in between the last wildcard spot and where the Blue Jays sit, that the Blue Jays are better than, to me, is like maybe the Tigers, and they played the Tigers a few weeks ago and they lost 3 or 4. So, yes, you can look at the 5% fan. Like it's 5% to make the playoffs. It's not 5% to win a playoff game. It's not 5% to like do any damage once you make the playoffs. Like I just don't think that there is a world that you can like kind of look at the way that this team has performed and be like, yeah, they're gonna win 50 games in the second half.
I think it's really indicative that if you pull up Tankathon, that the Blue Jays are right near the top of that. It's getting into the territory where you should probably be thinking about lottery odds. Not that there's a Paul Skeens, waiting at the end of the rainbow in the 2025 draft. And we discussed.
Well, I mean, Ethan Holiday's there.
Yeah, like there's maybe some answers, right? But I mean, it's just not the nature of the beast, right? You're just not going to get a guy to save your franchise, so to speak, right? And it's not like this front office has had all that much success with high picks as it is. I think back to the 5th overall pick in Austin Martin, and of course he's a big leaguer now, but not a 5th overall pick level guy. So how much do you even trust this front office to go about a rebuild? Like, to me, we're at an inflection point in the Blue Jays path, and there's kind of 2 trains of thought here. There's kind of the business decision that would be keeping anyone that's basically not on an expiring deal and seeing if it's a 2025 retool away. But the problem with that is that there's just not enough talent on the team for next year that you would have to supplement, that you just don't, that's just not something you're going to be able to do. It's pretty clear at this point that this team has hit its ceiling, and there's not a lot of room for them to get better because so much of their talent is tied up in aging and bad talent, really.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, right? Like Yeah, like if they are going to trade away pieces, they're either going to trade away the expiring guys or they're going to kind of fully blow it up. And the fully, again, like this, there's like so many layers to peel back on this. And like before, like the GM thing is interesting to me because do they trust Ross Atkins to be the guy in charge of like fully rebuilding it when he was the one who built this team? I would probably lean that's maybe more of an off-season thing. So maybe it's more of we're gonna, we'll let you get rid of the expiring pieces and then we're gonna hire somebody else to do the rest after.
But the problem is that wastes a deadline, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're gonna get way more for Vlad or Bo this summer than you are next summer. And it's even the fact that that's a discussion that's, being had, it just kind of serves it emphasizes the failures of this front office.
I mean, I think with at least Vlad, like you would obviously get a lot for him, but I think he's probably the type of guy that you would feel comfortable giving an extension to, right? Like you would feel comfortable giving him an extension this offseason. So maybe like you don't necessarily need to look at it as like we need to blow it up and trade him because he's young enough that you can like see him being part of like your next contention window and being like the face of the franchise. You keep him around even in the tough times to like keep selling tickets, keep selling jerseys, keep like kind of somebody on the field that people want to come watch, right? And with, I mean, even if that doesn't go well with where you're at next year, at least it's a guy that like you feel that way about. So I think it's likely. I mean, it's obviously it sounds like they're not going to trade him or Bo, but I think if you approach like his situation like that, then it does make it easier to like maybe part with some of your other pieces who are going to never have more value than they do right now, right?
But
Like,
I don't know if those pieces exist. I mean, I think of like a Jimmy Garcia and a Yusei Kikuchi, right? Like those guys clearly right now are kind of at the pinnacle of their value, if you will. Although the recent play of both of those guys has probably put a bit of a damper on it, and the timing maybe
yeah.
could have been a little better.
Well,
But
I'm thinking more like of the guys who like a Chris Bassett or like a Kevin Gossman or Jose Barrios, like those guys wouldn't
but no one's trading. Well, I mean, Jose Barrios
well,
is not going anywhere. That
I
guy
mean,
is not moving.
yes, so like maybe more so on like the Bassett Gossman front where those guys like another team could probably talk themselves into like paying a hefty price for them right now whereas like later, they're another year older, um they're another year closer to free agency, you don't get the postseason run, whatever. So like you look at those guys and if you want to like if you talk yourself into trading those guys, like I think that makes sense and like that's something that you can do along with keeping Vlad. But at this point, like it's definitely the question is there. Like if you keep those guys, are you even going to be good enough in 2024 as you mentioned, or 2025, sorry. Are you going to be good enough? And you trade away like all these guys on expirings, like you have to replace them. And it's not like you're moving a ton of salary out anyways, right? Like you're probably not clearing up enough cap room to the point where you're able to bring in a ton of pieces to replace a Danny Jansen, to replace a Yusei Kikuchi, to replace a Jimmy Garcia, right? Like there's just so much uncertainty in 2025, and it's I almost in the eye of the beholder, right? Like how good that you think that
But
Blue
this
Jays team can
also
be.
consider that it's called the eye of the beholder. This front office is clearly big believers in this core, right? Like they've continuously gone to bat for them throughout the past year, throughout the past 18 months, just over and over again. They've gone to bat for them, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because like if you're in charge and like you feel like that you don't want this front office to be the one to kind of start the rebuild. Like how do you approach that with this deadline being kind of like a huge point for this Blue Jays team? Like GMs almost never get fired in the middle of the season, right? And it would be really tough to bring somebody in and be like, all right, the team is yours, like build it up how you want, when they would have like 2 weeks to trade some of these guys and make decisions on Vlad, Bo, Bassett, Goss, like make all these huge decisions. Like you wouldn't have enough time. So is it more of like you're okay with Ross Atkins making these decisions for a couple weeks to trade off your expirings, and then you let somebody else have like a bigger view of the franchise in October.
Like that seems like the most like that seems like the most plausible set of circumstances. I just don't know that it's what I'd want to do. It just would feel like wasting a deadline to me. It's almost like you kind of have to commit to Ross Atkins as your rebuild GM because you can't let him dictate trading away major pieces and then dump them and be like, well, someone else gets to pick because he will have basically decided what, prospects, what type of players you're bringing in to supplement the score or to build the next score.
Yeah, I wonder if they are a little more hands-on, like they being Mark Shapiro, being like, hey, I'm not like you're not trading Yusei Kikuchi for number four starter with a number four and number five starter with years of control. You're trading him for a 20-year-old with high upside,
Yeah. Which
right?
is
Like,
what I think you'd want them to do, right? It's just a matter of if they will, and I just don't know that they're going to have the appetite for it. So again, this gets into that kind of idea where it's like you have two paths. You take the red pill or the blue pill, and what are they going to decide, right? It's very very clear that a decision is going to need to be made probably the next week or two, right? Because
yeah,
it's July.
yeah. I
June
mean,
27th as of recording. It's July.
I think we've had like on this podcast we've like kind of designated like the two different stretches to save the season, right? Like there's the stretch against the very poor competition where they like did the bare minimum. They like fell one game behind what we said that they needed to do. And then there's been this stretch against really good teams where they've have yet to win a series, right? Or I guess they won the first series against the Guardians, which was, good. Like you win your series at home, but then you turn around and get swept by them. So you're, 2-4 against that team in a week. And then the Red Sox series where you've already lost that 6-game stretch against them. And, it's not gonna, or I guess, yeah, they lost the 6-game stretch because the one game got pushed to August. But, now you've got the Yankees coming to town who the AL East leaders, like they maybe haven't been playing as well as they were early in the season, but it's still going to be a super tough series. And then you got the Astros coming to town after that, who are the hottest team in baseball. And it's going to be, like I just fail to see a world where this team can do anything to convince you otherwise that they have a chance of being competitive down the stretch.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty fair assessment. It's the fact of the matter is that you're not getting any reprieve in the next week or two. So
Even like just looking beyond that, like after the Astros, then they go on a 9-game West Coast trip where they go to
yeah,
Seattle, San Francisco,
it's
Arizona,
not good. It's not
and
good.
then coming out of the All-Star break, you go Detroit, Tampa Bay, Texas, Baltimore.
You're facing the best of the league. It's
They,
not getting easier.
their schedule is so tough, man. It's so funny because like yes, so they end July with Baltimore, and then in August they go Yankees, Baltimore, A's. I guess the A's Angels Cubs stretch is nice, but
But
man,
by
like
then it's already past the deadline. Like
yeah, so
you've already sold at that point, I think, in
yeah.
an ideal world. By the way, because we are coming up to Canada Day, do we know anything about these Canada Day jerseys? Not to go totally off topic.
I don't know. It's a great question. I haven't seen anything about it and very curious to see what the
Just a thought that popped into my head as we were talking about that Astros
yeah.
series, by the way. And
Yeah,
we'll get to that.
if they actually have scratched the Canada Day jerseys, because I feel like a lot of times on Canada Day they give away the Canada Day jersey, right? Like they've given away like the Springer one, the Martin one, like whatever. But this year the giveaway is a tuxedo hat. So
I don't know. I guess we'll see. The Bird's Eye View podcast, big on the Blue Jays jerseys, as we've made abundantly clear.
Yes, very interested in the jersey stuff. Okay, so we've gone like very, very negative here and like kind of zoned in on the selling, but there has been a couple positives around the team. Like you mentioned, Vladdy's been great. I had it pulled up here, but like since May 1st, he's got like a 150 WRC plus, sitting above 300, and the power started to come around a bit. But alongside him, Spencer Horwitz has been outstanding and like not quite on the Davis Schneider level of like come up and dominate, but like he's been their best hitter since coming up.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a really nice development. Again, you take the good where you can find it with this Blue Jays team because it seems like those are few and far between. But Spencer Horwitz coming up and having success is, I think, really important for this team because it's a guy coming up from the minor leagues having success, and they just have not had a lot of that outside of really like Davis Schneider. And then, of course, the fact that the major league team is not having success and they were looking for offense, and Horowitz has provided that. Now, again, you've got the issue of him not really being a second baseman, being forced to play there because you've got Vlad at first, mind you, who is now hitting. But it's nice to have a guy come up and have success. And it hasn't been a spark plug in the same way that, say, Davis Schneider was about 10, 11 months ago, back in August of last year. But for Horwitz to come up and to look like a major league hitter is an important development because he's a guy now that, and we had talked about, him being a potential bench piece, and he's already, 26. He's probably not in a prospect range. And who cares if he's replacing Daniel Vogelbach, if he's just going to play on the bench because he's already kind of old. And now all of a sudden he's providing some value to you out of your starting lineup.
Yeah, he's been so good. Like I mean, you worry a little bit about the power, but like the 2 home run game, great and all, and like the power hasn't been like totally evident outside of that. But like I mean, for a dude to get on base as much as he has, and like just to like really be a spark at the top of the lineup, right? Like I mean, I would hit him leadoff every single game. I think at this point where obviously Bo's doing it right now. They kind of had IKF doing it for a while, but I think Horwitz is kind of like like the guy to do that. It kind of funny for like a first baseman who like doesn't have a lot of speed to kind of be that guy, but like he's been so great, and I think at they've kind of been doing it, but it's really I'm sure we'll see more of it, like especially if they sell, but like it's like you really just got to let these young guys kind of come up and see what they can do.
Yeah, because this is the outcome for the team at this point. You got a little bit of Barger in the field, and that's where you're going to end up with these mistakes. That pop fly that he just totally miffed on. Right, you're going
Yeah.
to end up with guys making mistakes like that. It's it's if this team wants to be the best version of itself offensively, they're going to have to play these guys. So it's a question of, how much you want to trade off the defense for the offense, right? And becomes a bit of a balancing act. But I just don't, because you're not going to win these games 0 to -1. We've already seen that that's abundantly clearly not working. So you've got to inject some offense. Unfortunately, a guy like a Barger hasn't worked to this point, and it's going to probably take some time. And he may figure it out, he may not figure it out. But the fact that Spencer Horwitz seems to have figured it out, at least to me, speaks to the fact that there is somebody in the pipeline that's going to help.
Yeah, the Barger thing is interesting because he had like a 4 game hit streak and looked like a real contributor, but now the defense has been an issue. I would say like he's looked not great playing a lot of third base, so they had him in left field for the win against the Red Sox, and I wonder the Springer stuff is interesting with him because like Barger seems like his best fit would be in right field, and obviously there's not going to be a lot of playing time there, even if there should be. Um, but he's a guy I feel like you just kind of got to get him in the lineup and just let him figure it out at this point. Like there's no need to protect him or try and like save him from matchups or anything. Like just get him in the lineup, let him play. But the defense I would say is concerning. What are your thoughts kind of on where like the defense stuff is with him? Because like the third base has been not good.
I don't really know because to me, You've got him basically as one of your best hitting prospects, at least in theory. It hasn't really come to fruition at the big league level yet, but the hope is eventually it does. But the problem is that his best defensive position is blocked by one of the worst hitters in baseball. And I'm not really quite sure what you do about that. There's some sunk cost fallacy, right? Where maybe you do just put Springer on the bench and you just call it a day with him. Or maybe he's a guy that you consider Jose Abreuing and releasing him. Because the way that it's going right now, he's not a big league hitter at this point. And there's been some bad luck at times, but you can't bad luck your way to a 550 whatever OPS. It's just not feasible. So he's kind of at the point, I think, with as far as Springer goes, where if he's blocking a guy like Barger and preventing you from putting out something of an optimal lineup, then I'm not really totally sure what we're wasting our time here with.
Yeah, the Springer stuff is so tough because like obviously you want to have him in the lineup, and like John Schneider, I think he said it like 4 or 5 times where it's like, if we turn it around, like George is going to be a big part of that. Like I don't necessarily disagree with that statement. Like I feel like if they were to be good, like George Springer being good would be a big part of that, right? But it just feels like you watch his at bats and they're
There's a
not
lot
great.
of just being overmatched. There's a lot
Yeah.
of just taking pitches and not being able to fight him off. There's a lot of swing and miss. It's just he's not who he once was. And it's kind of incredible that this kind of fall off has happened. I think it's just one of the key cogs of this Blue Jays team being where they are. I mean, you're not expecting 34-year-old George Springer to put up all-star numbers. But for him to not even be a league average hitter these days is just so telling on just the miscalculations and misplays of this Blue Jays front office. And I don't fault them. It's like at the time it was the biggest signing I think in Blue Jays history.
No, I think even if the next, I guess he's got this year and then two more, even if the next two years go as poorly as this one, like I don't think you can look back on the signing and be like, what an awful signing, right? Like I think it was a sign of the shift of the franchise, and he helped your team make the playoffs twice. So
Yeah.
like I wouldn't look back on it and be like, oh, like what an awful signing, no matter how things go. Um,
I think just things that could go wrong have gone wrong, I think is
yeah.
really it.
And you know what? It's funny to me because like I obviously wish that we had the like multi-year bat tracking data with him, just to kind of like see where he's at and if like that actually is a major issue for him this season. But when you look at him month by month this year, like his bat speed has actually been going up. So, you know, everybody ripped Schneider for the, we have our internal data that suggests like that they're on their way back. And I don't know, like maybe if that's it, like they're looking at his bat speed and saying that it's not declining or something like that. But
It's
it's
just so hard to know, right? There's no metric that you and I have available that could possibly tell you that George Springer is having success. To me, it just seems like a guy going to bat for his players because he's a veteran guy, right? But just nothing about it is sensible.
yeah. It's interesting to look at his number because like he's like back to walking at above a 10% clip. His strikeout rate is like close to his like career low. Just the quality of contact has been bad. His barrel rate has dropped significantly. His hard hit rate is at a career low. His pull rate is way down from where it was when he was like an elite
George
hitter.
Springer.
Yeah, and so it's easy to sit here and be like, well, why don't you pull the ball more? But
Well, he
you
can't get
know,
around on the
he,
ball, it seems like.
yeah, which is weird because like you'd think him like the bat speed is fine, right? Like if you look at I have it up right now, like it's bat speed is 72.7 this month, which is a pretty good number as far as like obviously the takeaway from the bat speed thing is like that you can be on either ends of the spectrum and still be a good hitter. But for him, like the profile of hitter that he is, like the 72.7 is fine. So it's weird to me that like the pull rate is so far down. And I don't know if that's an approach thing or like if he's, if maybe it's just his reflexes are a little bit slower and not able to like get the barrel out. I don't know. Like it's really tough to look at the numbers without really knowing like what his approach is while he's hitting.
Yeah, it's exactly that, right? I just don't think that there's an answer here. And you're going to have to make a decision, especially as we kind of alluded to, if he's going to block guys.
Yeah. Yeah. What, like uh, if you are John Schneider and, considering the, if you're John Snyder and you like considering who George Springer is, his age, where this team is at, like what is your like is it like you're playing him 4 days a week, or is it you're gonna keep running him out there? Like what is your thought
Well,
process?
you can't keep running him out there. I do wonder also about. Listen, I mean, Varsho's hurt right now. He's dealing with a back issue, and I think that in some respects, there's there's a bit of a crowding now kind of in the outfield. You've got Davis Schneider in left field a good bit. You've got Addison Barger, who's probably a right fielder. Like you've suddenly come into a bit of a logjam of sorts kind of with your outfielders, right? And they all serve kind of different roles. Varsho and Kiermaier, obviously a lot of their value is defensive. You've got Davis Schneider, who's more of a stick guy. Like, did I say Schneider? Or did I say Kiermaier?
Schneider,
I
yeah.
might have said the wrong name.
Yeah.
Um, Whatever. You've got your defensive guys in Kiermaier and Varsho, and you've got your maybe stick guys in Schneider and in Barger, and then obviously in whatever realm you want to put Springer in, right? But you've got a bit of a kind of a glut here. So I wonder when Varsho does eventually kind of make his way back in the lineup in proper form, if maybe you consider maybe at that point you consider Springer finding his way to the bench.
Yeah, I wonder if like it's tough. Like I wonder if they say, all right, we're gonna ride this out until the trade deadline, and then when we move Kikuchi, Garcia, Jansen, Richards, Kiermaier, Turner, then we're gonna really kind of lean into the youth movement, and you kind of give like some of your veterans, you give them like the last month to try and at least prove something. And once that July 30th trade deadline hits, then you're like, all right, we're in sell mode. We've already sold everybody. We're in play the young guys mode, and you guys are, a George Springer. Um, some of the older guys are getting like 3 days a week.
I think that's what's going to have to happen. I don't know if it's what will happen, but it seems like the most reasonable, call it, set of circumstances. But I just don't know if the Blue Jays will have the courage to do so. I don't know if they will.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch because I think we've laid it out pretty well that the odds are not good that anything is going to turn it around, but they are a patient organization. I will put it that way. And a lot of things seem to happen they need a lot of proof to make things happen. So
Yeah. No, that's definitely a way that this team operates. But the problem is it's put them in this spot now where they believed in the offense coming back to life, and it hasn't.
yeah, it certainly has not. That is an understatement. And what a team they've been. Before we get out of here, I just want to touch on kind of the All-Star game stuff, which is, a month ago, basically, we're looking at it like who deserves to be an All-Star on the Blue Jays, and we were like Jose Barrios, Jimmy Garcia, Danny Jansen, Davis Schneider, and now it's like, man, like Vlad is going to be their only All-Star. Like, is there anybody else on the roster that you
I
look at and you're like, that is a potential All-Star?
maybe Chris Bassett because of the last month he's had, maybe, but goodness gracious, it's very it's very fitting that this team will not be sending very many all-stars considering the state of the team. And at the time, they were a roughly 500 team when we were having that discussion, right? And
Yeah.
now all of a sudden, they are very much no longer that. And a big part of that is the success that they had, be it, result or process wise, the success that some of these guys were having. It's no longer the case. And now you've really only got kind of Vladdy. And if you want to send a pitcher, maybe, but I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, I think when at the beginning of the year when Vladdy was like not on this insane heater, like he was kind of like a yeah, like kind of the first baseman in the AL situation isn't great, but like he's been okay. But now it's
He's
like
not. He's not
now
even leading. He's not even leading first baseman. Last I
I
saw, it's
know
Ryan
it's
Mountcastle.
Moncastle, yeah, which is crazy. But now it's like he's almost definitively gonna go, and like maybe Jimmy Garcia or David Schneider tags along, and that's like even that's
I
being
can't even see
optimistic,
that.
I'll
That
say.
is a very optimistic outlook on things. I think Jimmy Garcia. I think that the last couple weeks has ended his All Star campaign.
Yeah, the injury is tough for sure. He's been, it sucks, and we didn't even touch on this, but like all of the guys who you would consider trading have been poor recently. So, it kind of sucks if you do end up trading them. You hope that they at least turn it around for July, and that you can, reinvigorate some of that trade value a little bit.
Yeah, you're gonna have to, and we'll see if they're able to. But I'm really concerned at the state of matters. Even though they won their last game, they're I think 3-7 or 2-8 in their last 10. It's pretty dire.
It is. This is the worst, I think, states. They're in a bad spot. They're in a bad spot. Just simply put, in a really bad
A
spot.
horrific spot.
And like
It doesn't get easier too.
It's gonna be a very tough um spot for them to work through to even like come out okay, whether it's next year or post rebuild. Like they're in a spot where if they decide to blow it up, it's not like a slam dunk. We'll be back in 4 or 5 years.
Dangerous place to be.
Speaking of 4 or 5 years, just before we go, kind of news that I just saw come up here. Arjun Nimala is back with the low A Dunedin Blue Jays and went 1 for 4 with a home run in the game this morning. If you want some positive news.
Yeah, I did mention him briefly. Nice that he picked up a knock, and nice that he's back. Hopefully on track. I guess we'll see what that entails, but certainly could use a big second half from Arjun Nimala and any number of the Blue Jays prospects.
We'll be on prospect watch in the second half of the year for
sooner
sure.
or later.
It'll be a great second half of watching some minor league ball. Hopefully,
that's what it seems like we're headed. Ooh boy, boy.
All right. Well, with that, we are going to go. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Bird's Eye View podcast. Make sure you drop a follow or review wherever you get your pods. You can follow and subscribe on YouTube. We are there at the Bird's Eye View podcast. You can follow us all on Twitter. I am at Worden_Zach. Jori is at Jori Negin-Shecter. And the pod is at BEV_pod. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you later this week.